Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Eric Devin and Jeremy Smith. A mad midweek and an interrupted weekend gives us plenty to talk about this evening. But before we double dip into Ligue and the European fixtures ahead in midweek this week as well, here are the latest headlines. Tuesday's fixtures saw Monaco get back to winning ways as two Radamel Falcao penalties pulled them out of the drop zone in their win over Amiens. Nice failed to capitalise on a number of great opportunities as they drew 0-0 with Angers, while Nicolas Pepe's goal was enough to give Lille the win in a fun game against fellow surprise package Montpellier. On Wednesday, the first game of the Julien Stéphan reign at Rennes got off to an ideal start as they powered to a 2-0 win away at Lyon. Hatem Ben Arfa grabbed a great strike against his former club, while Jordan Sibacho netted his first goal for the Breton club. Another Champions League hopeful fell as Nantes came from behind to beat Marseille 3-2. The league's joint top scorer Emiliano Sola grabbed a goal and an assist, as l'OM have now lost more games this season than they did in the entirety of the 2017-18 campaign. Paris Saint-Germain were almost caught out in Strasbourg for a second season in a row after a 1-1 draw. The teams split penalties and offside goals, with the Alsace side inches from pulling out an unlikely win in the final moments. Toulouse won for the first time since September with a 1-0 victory over Reims. An awful mistake from Carl-Johan Jonsson gifted Dijon a vital 2-1 win over bottom side Guingamp. Bordeaux scored in the final minute to see off Saint-Etienne in an enthralling 3-2 victory, as Nîmes made it 4 wins in 5 Ligue 1 matches as they won 2-1 at Caen. This weekend, a number of games were suspended before taking the field due to the ongoing Gilets jaunes protests in France. Paris Saint-Germain versus Montpellier, Angers versus Bordeaux, Nîmes versus Nantes, Toulouse versus Lyon, Monaco versus Nice, and Saint-Etienne versus Marseille will now be played in a midweek slot in mid-January. On Saturday, of the games that did go ahead, Amiens pulled off an enormous win that lifts them back out of the drop zone by beating lowly Guingamp 2-1. Jocelyn Gourvenec is still looking for his first win since returning to the club. His side now 5 points off those above him, with 1 win all season long. Elsewhere, Rennes continued their recent resurgence with another 2-0 win against Dijon. While on Sunday, Strasbourg couldn't quite keep a good thing going as they drew 2-2 with Caen. Reims almost pulled off an unlikely win in the final match of the weekend, but Pepe's penalty with the final kick of the game broke their hearts in what was almost an excellent win for the newly promoted side. And that's all for now, but do keep up to date with things in the world of French football. Head on over to our website at www.getfootballfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week in Rennes, where before the midweek games got ahead, out went Sabri Lamouchi and in comes Julien Stéphan, at least for now. It's a temporary appointment for the time being. At the time of speaking, at least, Eric. And it comes off the back of that 4-1 defeat that Lamouchi finally got given his marching orders. 4 wins all season in the 15 games before the midweek fixtures. We always say that Rennes are close to Europe. We say that they chop and change a little bit too often. But was this the right decision to get rid of Lamouchi at this point?
Obviously we have the archetypal new manager bounce happening, but to see it happen quite so dramatically, I think means that decision has been validated. I think that given the investment Rennes had made over the summer and the previous summer, they've spent quite a bit. Sibache, Ben Arfa, again, on a free but considerable wages. Romain de Castillo, Jakob Johansson on a free. There's wages involved there. There's a great deal of investment into this club, and I think that they saw, perhaps a bit of flux at Monaco, obviously, and that they had a bit of a chance to move up the ladder in Ligue 1, if you will. And I think that, Strasbourg, especially since they switched to a back three, have been really banging form, and they've been really impressive. But to lose that heavily to a team of such modest means really was the final nail in the coffin. It didn't seem like Rennes had sort of tactical identity, tactical cohesion. It seemed that oftentimes that Clement Grenier and Hassan Ben Arfa were stepping on each other's toes. But now, within these last two matches, we're starting to see a little bit more form from Ben Arfa in particular. He scored in each of the last 3 league matches he's played in. Grenier is starting to look a little more comfortable with a little bit more space in front of him as Ben Arfa moves further forward. Sarr is starting to find his feet again as well. And I think that it's been absolutely the right decision. I think that, obviously Lyon might have been a little bit distracted in the midweek match, a little bit of fatigue. And Dijon aren't any great shakes, speaking of yesterday's result. But still, if one looks at the table below PSG, I mean, Lille are in second now, 2 points clear, but they could only draw today. I don't think, personally, if there's anything that says, even a place in the top 3 is too far for Rennes if they catch form in the right way, especially if you've got the likes of a Lyon, for example, continuing to battle in the Champions League, and some other sides ahead of them. I'm looking maybe at Montpellier, for example, struggling with squad depth, as in there's not a lot of opportunities for those sides to rotate. So, yeah, I think this is the right decision. I think that Rennes, given the talent they have on show, I mean, that's some of the best attacking talent in the league. I know it can be rather fitful, rather erratic in its nature, many of those players, but on their day, Rennes do have a lot of supremely talented individuals. I think particularly of Sarr and Ben Arfa, but I think that the hierarchy there was just a little too frustrated with the outlay of money they'd had in the last 2 summers, and just wanted the sort of results that they had hoped when they managed to get into the Europa League last year.
Absolutely, and that's the interesting thing, really, Jess, that Lamouchi didn't really push on someone like Sarr, and when Hatem Ben Arfa came in and was fit, he didn't really excel in the way that we maybe anticipated him. We thought that maybe they'd got a striker in Jordan Sabacho that could maybe score the goals that they were missing last season from a striker's point of view, at least. Anyway, they have a lot of flair, a lot of money, but they never really seem to be moving forward. And then in these last 2 games under Stefan, with him coming into sort of interim charge, it remains to be seen if he'll get the job full time. Obviously, the Stade Rennes B coach as well, so it would be promoting with him, which would be a nice point. A lot of the younger players would have seen him in the background for a little while, but they've, while you could say it's maybe a new manager bounce, at the same time they already look more attacking, more expressive. Hatem Ben Arfa has been able to get a couple of goals as well, which doesn't hurt either. Is there positives to take that Stefan may be the man? Despite, I'm assuming a number of people will be interested in the possibility of a job with Rennes with the finances they've got and the players they already have, but maybe Stefan might be the man to take them forward.
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen. I mean, yes, there's been a positive start so far, and I think I read a stat that said that he's the first Rennes manager since something like the 1930s to win his first 2 matches in charge. So I guess that bodes well. But the thing with Rennes is, I just feel that so often that they've had everything has looked in place for them to build a stronger squad or have a stronger run or whatever, and there's always something, whether it's on the pitch or off the pitch, that scuppers it. Lamouchi obviously had a good start, or certainly a good finish, for example, to last season. But there's always something going on, and I feel sorry for Lamouchi. I don't think he was given really a fair whack. I mean, I'm trying to remember, I don't think he's been there for a full season, for a full year rather. So, to say that they've had 2 good summers of signings, they absolutely have. But it's not like the first summer was down to him, and frankly, I don't think the second summer was down to him either, because it's been well publicised that there's been a lot of tensions between him and the bosses and him and Letton don't get on. I'm not sure how many of the summer signings actually were Lamouchi's in any way. I think he specified the positions that he wanted to strengthen in. They basically strengthened in all the other positions and weakened the ones that he wanted to have more backup in. So yeah, on paper that there is a good squad, but attacking wise, there's only so many you can play. Ben Arthur, I think, it's not going to come to anyone as news to anyone who's heard me before. I'm absolutely not one of his biggest fans, and so he raises himself against Lyon just so he can goad their fans. But if there was one player I didn't want in the trenches with me, it would be him. And I feel a little bit sorry for Lamouchi. I think he was having some of his calls undermined, and I think once that happens, even if a lot of the changing room was on your side beforehand, if they know that you're not a lame duck, but know that if they're unhappy, they can always go to the sort of president or the sporting director and play the two off against each other. I think it puts you in a difficult position. And mention of Sarr, I actually think Sarr has been a hell of a lot better this year than last year, for example. I think there were injury niggles, but there was also a lot of inconsistency and a lot of sort of wasted promise and poor final product. This year, I think he's been producing a bit more consistently. That could be down to Lamouchi as much as anyone else. He's the one who's coaching him and sort of nurturing him. So I do feel sorry for him, but certainly so far so good for Stefan. He's obviously well thought of. He's obviously, it was well known that Henri wanted him to come to join him at Monaco. So, there must be a reason why he's in demand. So, and I think a few of the Rennes players sort of tweeted how happy they were that he was taking charge for the moment, although that might just be trying to guarantee they get a starting spot. So I don't think too much should be read yet into these two results. The Lyon one was a particularly good one, but it is Lyon we're talking about. We know that they can do this kind of thing. And 2-0 at home against a team who are third, fourth from bottom, no, fourth or fifth rather. I don't think that's anything to get too excited about yet. So I'm not ready to say that this was a great move yet.
And that will be the interesting thing heading into the winter break that's fast approaching us, Eric. I mean, they've had, since January 2016, they've had 4 different managers. They had Philippe Montagnier, obviously, and it was a very inconsistent few years under the then, after that, Nottingham Forest manager. And then Roland Courbis came in and didn't really move the needle that much after a decent spell at Montpellier. And then the sort of blockbuster one of Christian Gourcuff, where a lot of Ligue 1 clubs were looking at him, but he never moved the needle much. And Sabri Lamouchi sort of went on the same sort of radar of everyone else, of up and down, left and right, instead of going forwards really more than anything else. But go back to really Stefan, like Jess says, he's well thought of. He's obviously going to get a little bit more time before anyone else comes in. You would imagine. I can't see that Rennes will be bringing someone in before that winter break hits. So that means they've got games against Astana in midweek. They've got Guingamp away from home, which at the moment should really be a free pass given Guingamp, but we'll talk about those in a moment. They've got the derby, but also in the Coupe de Ligue against Nantes, and a home game against Nîmes, who are absolutely flying at the moment, really. But 4 games that you would see at least as winnable. Maybe arguably the Nantes game will be a little bit more tougher, but if he does get the results there, it's going to be difficult with other people looking at him as well, not to offer him the job permanently, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Rennes should take a flyer on this. I mean, if they get Europa League qualification in terms of advancing into the knockout round, that's great. But I think that there's really an opportunity to continue to develop the young players that we have on hand here. And I think that already we're seeing a level of green shoots with some of these players, that they're being given more of a chance. So looking at Mbanyang and Sebacheo in particular under Stefan seem to be being given more of a chance. James Liasaliki as well started yesterday. He's a player who'd really been in the shadows the last few weeks under last few months under Lemouchi, and I think unfairly so, Benjamin Bourigeaud as well. Players that were very integral down the stretch for Lemouchi last year. He seemed to be ignoring them, and I think that Stefan realizes the level of talent they have and is willing to get them back in a chance now that perhaps stakes are a little bit, I guess I'll say a little bit tempered by expectation at this point in time. It's also good to see, I should say, Abdoulaye Diallo back in the side after coming back from injury. He's a keeper who's had a pretty decent season after finally getting his chance, and well deserved to see him back in the 11 there for a run as well.
I think he's one of the flashpoints because I think he's one that Letton was demanding be put back into the team, whereas Lemouchi was more of a Kubek fan.
Absolutely. It's an interesting battle to have, at least. Anyway, I don't think many teams will be arguing between those two goalkeepers. They're a bit more quality than some of the others on show, at least anyway, in Ligue on this season. But a chance to get through to the Europa League will be massive if Stefan can do that. And then two games they should really be winning in Liga, as well as a interesting cup game where if you can get a win over your rivals, it's always a good thing. He's got a real chance to get that job, and maybe Rennes avoiding the sort of either outsider or blockbuster sort of managerial signing for a change might be the right path to go, since it's not really worked out for them the last few times, at least anyway. Going on to a team who's got from bad to worse really so far this season is Guingamp, who are rock bottom of the league on just 8 points. The closest team to them is still Monaco on 13 after Amiens beat them at the weekend and lifted above the Principality club. But they've been pretty awful, really, all right, and absolutely honest. Jez, they've only won one game all season long. That was back on week 8 against Angers. We said then at that moment it looked like maybe they were turning a corner. They obviously allowed Comboire to go. Since then, they've still not won a game. They under Jocelyn Gourvenec since his return. In fact, they've not really changed par of course at all, really. It goes down to two really, really bad defeats in the last week as well. I mean, Dijon was avoidable in all senses because of the Janssen mistake, which was... well, you saw the players on the floor after he made it, at least anyway. And then the one that compounds it this weekend, losing to the second, well, the team just above them then in Amiens. They've got Monaco just before the winter break as well, so they could be even further of a gap coming for them soon. They're in deep water already, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're really pulling a mess from last year. It's get out of the ball, but it really doesn't look good at the moment. And it's hard to see why. On paper, I don't think they're certainly not the worst team in Ligue 1. I'm not sure that they're among the worst 3 in Ligue 1. You look at, for example, the back 5, or keeper in the back 4. I still think Kerbrat and Sorbonne are still one of my favourite centre-back pairings. I guess they're getting a little bit old now, but they are, they should have the experience and the nous to certainly not be conceding, I think, 34 goals so far, for example. Robocho, I think, is a decent left back. Ikoko, we know, is a good right back. There's just all through the team, there's sort of disappointment and underperformances and underachievement. Blas and Coco were being seen as the 2 of the next big things and the next possible France internationals after what they did with the international youth sides, and they really haven't kicked on at all. And Bakoto, certainly from a Metz point of view, he was good and he was a favourite, but I'm not sure that he's sort of real Ligue 1 star quality. And there's other players that, Rodelin, Roux, for example, they can have purple patches, as we saw probably from both of them at times last season. But again, do you want to rely on their goals to get you through? And Thuram as well. I can see potential there, but I do wonder if it's more about the name than anything else sometimes. So I feel like they should be doing more, and I really hoped that Gourvenec, obviously with his ties to the club, and I still rate him as a coach, even though it went wrong in the end of Bordeaux. I thought that he could get the best out of them, but yeah, just I don't know what the issue is, why everything's going wrong there, and as you said, the kind of mistake that Johnson made the other day, I think straight after they'd equalised, that's the kind of thing that really makes heads drop, and I think it's difficult to raise them again when things like that happen at such important junctures.
Yeah, it's one of the worst goalkeeping mistakes I've seen in a long while. Really, they had no problem with that. Just catch it really, and to drop that in the back again of the net against the Dijon side, who have also been pretty awful in the most recent run. It was really a hammer blow, and it's compounded by the result this weekend as well, Eric, where they maybe could have caught up some ground with other teams not playing as well, maybe breed some confidence heading into the final few games before this winter break. But looking at their problems again, Eric, they've got the worst defence in the league. They can't keep teams out. And then going forward, I mean, Marcus Thuram's got 6 goals this season, but 4 are from the penalty spot. So we can kind of have a disclaimer there. The next one is Nicolas Benezet, who can not stay fit regularly enough to only in sort of spits and spurts, really. He's got 3 goals. After that, there's no one with more than 1, really. So you can see where the problems are. It's kind of at both ends of the table. And then you start thinking, how can they resolve it?
I have to agree with what Jeremy said, that they're not the worst team in the league. They're not the worst team. They're not, maybe not even the bottom 3 on paper, but they've been especially hard hit by injuries. And I don't think that that's been given enough credence. I think that, I know Nolan Roux has had his foibles, but I think the fact that Metz weren't relegated when they was down to his scoring prowess last season. I think that Ronnie Rodlan has been incredibly instrumental in keeping Caen up in recent seasons. And I think that there is talent there. I think that a really underrated loss has been Luca Doe. He's missed, I think, something on the order of a half dozen matches in defensive midfield as well. I think that you've got an over-reliance then on Etienne Dito, who's 35, 36. And alongside him, the options are pretty similar. You've got, Leogang Piri, who's, hasn't done much for me. He's a very prosaic presence, but doesn't offer nearly anything going forward. Maybe Gassuma Fofana, who signed from Amiens in the summer, is a little bit better, but I don't see him having any sort of consistency either. And the same goes with Blah. So I think that, Guingamp had a decent summer. I think that the leadership and the play of Jimmy Briand, who continues to do fairly well for Bordeaux, has really hit them hard. And I think that that's a frustrating situation. But I also think that they bought well to replace the veteran. And I think that they perhaps just should, if these players that they brought in had maintained a relative level of performance. I mean, Rodlan and Roux, they're not spring chickens, but neither are they so old that one would expect their performances to tail off. Were they fit and playing at a normal level, I think that there would be a more reasonable expectation. I would say mid-table. I don't think anybody would consider them contenders for Europe, but they're not cut away. And I think that, if you look at sides that I think are more limited, at Amiens, at Dijon, at Caen, I think those sides are all far more limited on paper. I know Caen have a decent backline and some exciting players like Frédéric Guibert, but there's no reason Guingamp should be where they are at the foot of the table, other than injuries. And I think that given time to get these players fit, to have some time to work with them over the winter break, I think that they'll come back stronger and make a real fist of staying up. I don't think that they're doomed. I think that they've been just a little bit snake bitten. And, much like we saw with perhaps, I think, Jardim at Monaco, I think that with speaking to Camboware's situation, I think that he had, somewhat overachieved with that side during his time there. And I think that, perhaps the veteran players had just perhaps tuned him out, having been under his stewardship for so long. So Gourvenec has been given, a relatively decent side. I know Thuram sometimes flatters to deceive, but I think there's some potential there as well. And maybe playing this side in a diamond with one of Benazir Rodley behind a partnership of Thuram and Roux once they're both fit. I think that there is potential there for this side to recover, because I think that Guingamp have been a really nice story since their promotion, and we'd like to see that continue. And they should have the tools to do it going towards the rest of the season.
Yeah, and a couple of games left of this half of the season at least anyway, and we've already mentioned one team that they've got to face. They've got to face a resurgent Rennes side that are on a bounce at the moment, and then they finish off away to Monaco, which gets bigger and bigger by the week depending on which Monaco team turns up. Really, it's going to be a massive.
I think sorry to interrupt, but the Briand point is really interesting, because when he went to Bordeaux, Guingamp was really annoyed and kind of said, all right, we begrudgingly sort of agreed to let him go, but the whole, as long as he didn't go to another Ligue 1 team, and they were really upset when he did. And it all seemed at the time, why are you getting so upset over a real veteran? And maybe with hindsight, he was giving the team a hell of a lot more than people thought. Maybe not just on the pitch, but off it as well. And as Eric said, he's really performing well at Bordeaux as well. So maybe he's a much bigger loss than certainly I gave him credit for at the time.
And I was just about to mention, Jez, another player that we've probably a little bit, at least anyway, some Ligue fans might have forgotten completely almost, but that contributed a lot in Yannis Saliba, really. He's not really done anything on loan at Saint-Etienne. He's thinking that the grass is greenest elsewhere. He's not really got a game. He's only played 3 times for them, really, and most of the time off the bench, really. He's not scored. He's someone who was really good for Guingamp and gave them a lot of balance on the opposite side. Coco scored plenty of goals, was linked with Premier League clubs at a time, and can maybe give them a spark, maybe if they can convince him to come back, knowing he's getting at least game time for a bit and put himself in the shop window a little bit. Again, maybe that's another place, but that's the interesting side for any side at the bottom of the table at this time of year. Jez, is with the finances in Ligue 1, comparatively to somewhere like the Premier League, it's a lot harder to buy yourself out of trouble. So what can they do in the summer if they don't feel like they can train these players up, and maybe they need one or two additions to the squad? It's a juggling act, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. In January, I just think everything's risky making moves in January, and a lot of it might be down to sort of which loan signings they can bring in. But yeah, more likely than not, it is going to be, I guess, players like Saliba, players who were expecting first team football, aren't getting it at other French clubs, and are going to hope to use that as a springboard for the second half of the season. But obviously, a lot depends on who is available, or which players their owners make available. And unless it's a kind of player like Jordan Ferry, who Guingamp were linked to before he went to Nîmes, I think it was. It was Nîmes, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Guingamp's relegation rivals are unlikely to offer them anyone that could strengthen them, and the teams higher up, because the league is so compressed that there is competition everywhere, and players and teams are going to be looking. Either a few maybe are still left in European football, or others are pushing for European football. I'm not sure there's many clubs that are going to be offering many of their players out to others. So I think it is slim pickings, and I think the January window, whatever position any club is in, I think it's rare that a team has a really strong January window, and certainly rare that they have a sort of season-changing one that defines their season. It doesn't take much. I mean, you need, in most leagues in the world, I think one of the main things you need is just a decent goal scorer. Because as Metz found last year, it didn't save them. But as Eric said, Roux hit such a good goal scoring form that it did sort of delay the inevitable for a long time. And Guingamp are not as far adrift as Metz are. So if they could find someone or get someone fit who's capable of scoring 10 goals, a dozen goals through the second half of the season, that could well be the difference between keeping them up or not. But it may be a case of finding them from within, either getting someone fit who hasn't been available, or Thuram suddenly finding his goal scoring boots or something. Because I'm not sure you want to be relying on being able to bring someone in who's going to change everything for them.
Absolutely. And then the worry is they play Rennes next weekend as Con face Toulouse, which is, while they're on a bad run of form themselves, that you could argue that Con may feel they can get a win out of a Toulouse side that have been struggling, except from getting finally a win last weekend. Monaco faced Lyon, so there's a bit of a chance then, but when you face them just before the winter break, if you lose that game, having lost against Rennes, you sort of falling further and further back. It starts to get more desperate, and some of the players go into that winter break with that sinking feeling. I'm sure they'll hope that they can try to avoid that. On to the midweek fixtures more wholly now, really, because there was a lot of little upsets, really. It was a really fantastic midweek round, and starting with a couple of the teams that are in big Champions League action midweek as well. And we'll start with the leaders, Paris Saint-Germain, Eric, who have successive draws. It took a while for anyone to take any points off of them, and as the saying always goes, you wait for one bus and two come at once. And Strasbourg almost nicked it as well. They obviously, Paris Saint-Germain had a goal rightfully called for offside, and Strasbourg had a goal in the last couple of minutes rightfully called just offside for Thomason, the header. But yet again, they're sort of the kryptonite to this Paris Saint-Germain team at times, aren't they, Strasbourg? And PSG have got a few things they maybe need to be concerning themselves about.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, it would be foolhardy to suggest that PSG are going to have any other result with the season other than winning the league at a trot. But until what we saw from Bordeaux last weekend, I think that what we saw from Strasbourg in midweek, that PSG aren't impregnable and that they can struggle, especially if you've got teams that play with a lot of width and have a lot of pressing energy and in the form of Levo Matiba, for example, a lot of physicality. That PSG, I think that I like the three-man defense that Tuchel's played. I think it gives considerably more freedom to Neymar and Mbappe, which is what one wants to do, to give your two best attacking players that level of freedom and attacking autonomy. But it also could place an over-reliance on players who have limitations. Fred Kimpembe, for example, is normally a fairly solid steward on the left side of that back three. He's a fantastic passer of the ball, but we've seen with France that sometimes he has a bit of jangling nerves. Thilo Kehrer, I think, is improving, but still struggles for consistency at times. And Thiago Silva's had a very strong 2018. I think it would be difficult to argue otherwise, but I think that he still shows his age at times. So bearing that in mind, I think that if PSG are going to play against a side like Strasbourg with similar width and a real impetus for playing on the counter, and you've got combative midfielders like Jonas Martin and Ibrahima Sissoko, that you're going to have a battle in the trenches. I know that Sissoko in particular perhaps is not of the greatest technical quality, but he's certainly willing to get stuck in and play hard. And I think that playing against that style of football just has the potential to set PSG back on their heels a little bit, because the nature there is that they have been so successful playing on the counter. If you look at, for example, some of their better Champions League nights, and this isn't the PSG of Emery or years past where they're cycling the ball over and keeping control. There's a little bit more of an element of trying to make Mbappe the focal point, use his pace to catch teams out, and then you set yourself up for the counter attack, if you will. And I think that's been able to get them caught back at their heels. Bordeaux, again, same thing last weekend. You had very pacey players in the form of a Jan Karamo as well, giving them quite a bit of difficulty. So again, there's not a formula for success against PSG because not every team has the level of organization and the level of drive to make it work. But I can certainly see more points being dropped in the near future were they to come up against a team that plays with that sort of verve. I mean, the match that was canceled this weekend, I was frankly very excited to see. Given how well Montpellier have played, again, on the counter with high intensity, with a high intensity style of play. So, and particularly with two excellent attacking wingbacks as well there in Oyongo and Aguilar. So, again, I think that, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Tuchel can use this to, knock on wood as PSG progresses in the Champions League to sort of, make this be a bit of a corrective and to see, okay, this is drawn out some weaknesses for us. Is that 3-4-1-2 or 3-5-2, whatever, it's just 3-4-3, whatever system you want to call it, is that system going to make sense against every opponent? Or do we have to play a 4-3-3 at times or a 4-3-1-2? Does a midfield of Marquinhos and Julian Draxler work in every situation? If Adrien Rabiot is going to continue to be a peripheral figure as he seems to have been in recent weeks. So it's food for thought for PSG more than anything worrying, I would say. But it certainly does and has made for some compelling viewing over the past 7 days.
Absolutely, and they come up in a situation in midweek with that food for thought, really, where they're winning. They're definitely in against Red Star, but heading to Serbia, I'm sure that the Belgrade side will be pumped up, shall we say, Jez, to try and play as spoiler, really, because a draw might be enough, but also might not be. It obviously depends on that result between Napoli and Liverpool, but Red Star have shown already in this group that they can pull off a result at home against either of the sides they've faced already, really. This is a difficult place to go to, and with PSG not maybe quite as rampant in the league as previously, it's causing some question marks, at least ahead of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to read too much into Ligue matches because they've basically got the lead sewn up, and we say it so often, but it is all about the Champions League with them. So they can be forgiven for taking their foot off the gas a little bit, sort of post Liverpool and pre the big decider this week. But I think the Bordeaux and Strasbourg results showed that if you don't give PSG too much credit and you are willing to kind of stand up to them, then they can be got at. And Red Star, both the team and the sort of atmosphere, they're not an easy prospect, particularly in the Maracana there. And I think they've had a win and a draw in the group so far. So that they're proving that it's not an easy place to go to get a result. And I still think that there are some mental weaknesses in that PSG team, and that they can be sort of shaken up. And I still expect them to get through, but I don't think it's a formality. And I can see a couple of real scares before it happens. And I'd agree with Eric that I think PSG are probably at their best sort of on the break playing very, very quick football. But I'm sure Red Star will work that out after the first match, and they're certainly not going to sort of lie down and let PSG walk into the next round. And I think we discussed it after the Liverpool match. What I was really impressed with was how, for the first time, PSG looked mentally up for it. I think they need to go up another level this week. I think, as I said, at home to European great like Liverpool, that's relatively easy to do. But I want to see players like Neymar, Di Maria, Draxler do it away in a really intimidating atmosphere when the chips are absolutely down. And I'm still not 100% convinced that they're all capable of doing that.
But it'll be interesting to see if they do get a little bit jangled by Red Star in midweek. And before we move on to the other Champions League hopeful that we have, Eric, I just wanted to quickly mention Strasbourg, really, because it was a great result. They got a fantastic win the weekend before. They'll be really disappointed they let the one slip against Caen earlier today, really, because it would have been an excellent week for them, really, and a number of players we've mentioned before, like Liam Matiba, who's had a terrific start to the season with him, and I love with his tucked-in shirt as well, which is a nice fashion choice, at least anyway, it separates him from the crowd. But one player I wanted to highlight, although he did give away the penalty in the end, he did score the one that got them in front, and that's Kenny Lala, who's even getting France national team talk at the moment, really. He's had a terrific season.
Yeah, I mean, again, what is he, 27, 28? I don't know that, putting him in discussions for France necessarily makes sense, but I think he's definitely been, one of Liga's quietly better presences. Him and Lionel Carroll on the opposite flank as well is no small potatoes either. I think that both of them have really been given, a lot more freedom since Strasbourg has switched to 3-5-2. I kind of wonder what a table would look like from week 5 or week 6 whenever they did that. I think Strasbourg would be comfortably inside the top 6 if one were to take a look at that. I think that the inclusion of Mutiba, who doesn't start regularly. I'm not really sure exactly what's going on there. Maybe he's a Paco Alcacer type player that Thierry Loret feels he's more effective off the bench. But yeah, I think that Adrian Thomason is starting to look more comfortable as well. But Ligue and Carroll both, playing as wingbacks rather than as part of a back four, are both really fantastic players going forward. And I think that with a slightly less defensive responsibility and more creative impetus to use their pace and cross-state ability, and having a very solid target man in Mutiba, has really made all the difference in the world for that team tactically. I mean, they already had a pretty solid midfield with the likes of Martin and Sissoko, who I think has been a really canny replacement, maybe even an improvement given their form this season on Aoulou. I know Alou's injured at present, but Sissoko, has a lot of cultish energy and has a good eye for a pass as well, especially into wide areas. So, he's got the targets there in terms of Carroll and Lala. So, yeah, that tactical shift has really brought the best out of a variety of players. And, there's other players looking at the likes of Martinez and Lamine Kone, who have really, been rejuvenated by that role as well. I mean, they'd sort of been afterthoughts, in their previous situations, but they're looking, okay, not like world beaters, but they're looking to be, average or maybe even above average Liga center back. So there's, really something special there, Brian under Thierry Loret. I wasn't very high on Strasbourg ahead of the season, to be quite frank. I like the signing of Sels quite a bit, but I was concerned as to how the losses that they had there, would Aoulou and Stefan Bauken would suss themselves out. But it looks like this team is, obviously they're not France's most improved. I mean, you have to look to Lille Montpellier in that regard, but they've been a really underrated success story this season since that tactical shift. So well done to Loret and well done to those managers. Those players, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Loret is showing how good of a manager he is. We already knew that from his previous spell, really, back in Ligue, but with Strasbourg as well, he's just showing, keeping them up, keeping them in a solid mid-table position this season with some interesting players. And we all know about the plan there, that hopefully they can become a bit of a stalwart in this league again. And they've got real great manager to keep that in, but I'm sure other people will be looking at the job he's doing at this moment and casting admiring glances should any vacancies come up a little bit higher in the table, or even higher up in the table in Europe sooner rather than later. On to the other side in midweek action this week, and it is Lyon, Jez, who in the last game weren't too great. I mean, Lyon we've been mentioning the last couple of weeks, at least anyway, except from maybe the Manchester City game, you might argue that we're maybe getting away with a couple of games. The Bordeaux one, they sort of let that one slip against Guingamp. They allowed them too much sort of space to get into the game a little bit. Against Lille in midweek, it was in the last weekend, it's a fantastic game really, but they maybe looked out a little bit to get to 2-2, and then midweek, they didn't really get themselves involved. They had a couple of chances, really, but they never really looked like coming from behind. And it's sort of a story of Genesio's time at the club, really. And I'm sure fans just keep coming on his back, really. And it's a big game coming midweek now because Shakhtar, they're going away from home, knowing that you need at least a point, really. But how you play that, really, do you want to allow Shakhtar the chance to get into the game with their European pedigree and the chance they have? It's a big week for them, isn't it?
Yes, I saw after the Rennes match, someone tweeted, anyone who's saying that this is not an ideal, the Rennes defeat is not an ideal preparation for Lyon's European match hasn't seen any of Lyon over the last 2 or 3 years, which I think is true. If you're a neutral, then Lyon are probably still the team to watch because they've got players who can be absolutely fantastic or awful, and as a team, they can the same thing. One week they can look like world beaters, and the next week relegation candidates. And as for Lyon fans, I can see why it's extremely frustrating, and understand to an extent. I'm not sure he deserves as much as he gets, but I certainly understand to an extent that the stick that Genesio gets for not being able to get good performances out of quality players week in, week out. I still think the players get away with, some of the players anyway, get away with a little bit too much. The match against Rennes, I mean, it was, if you look at the stats, it was a little bit of an outlier in that, they certainly had the bulk of the chances, and they were sort of hit by 2 goals in 2 minutes. The first one, obviously, a very good finish from Ben Arfa. It was just a pity that in the second half there wasn't any kind of reaction, or not much of a reaction. They did hit the woodwork and they tried to get back into it. And being generous, you could say it's just one of those matches that happens sometimes. We tried, we couldn't quite. It felt like one of those matches where whatever happened, we were destined not to score. Or you can be a lot harsher and say this is classic Lyon. They should be doing better than this. And why can they raise their games against the very good opposition? But in matches like this, which I'm not going to disrespect Rennes by saying a run of the mill win, but a match that on paper it should not be the most daunting of matches, and considering the form that Rennes are in right now, why can't they turn up? And I mean, you can say it of a few teams, but even more so today after Lille scraped that draw against us. But the fact Lyon should be, I think a lot of us were saying it before the start of the season, Lyon should be walking, I think, second place, and even giving PSG a bit of a run for their money in terms of first place. The fact that they can count themselves lucky that they're still well in the hunt for second place, and it's only because so many other teams have shown inconsistency, because they're getting, they keep getting second, third, fourth chances. They're not necessarily taking them, and I still think somehow by the end of the season they would have taken second place, but it shouldn't be as uncomfortable as this.
It has been somewhat of an uncomfortable season, might be the best way to describe the first half of this campaign, really, Eric. But it does come down to a big game in midweek in Ukraine, because, like we say, it'd be fantastic for Lyon to go through, and for the French coefficient as well, no doubt. But 2 teams through the group stages would be ideal, and they've got a great chance at it. Can they do it?
It's
the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I think that Lyon's season has really been defined by consistency. I mean, some of that is in terms of attitude. If you look at a player like Memphis, some of that's due to an unexplainable drop in form. Looking at someone like Bertrand Traoré, who was really incandescent on the back end of last season, but has been, I would venture so far as to say liability, given his play coming out as a substitute, where Lyon drop points in recent matches. Nabil Fekir has struggled with injury. I mean, he looked brilliant against City at the Etihad. He was great a week later against Marseille, but then that tackle from Thiago Silva sidelined him for a month, and he missed the matches against Hoffenheim, and still seems to be not quite back to his best. Marcelo seems not quite to be the player he was last season. And there have been patches of poor form from Ndombele as well. I think he took a little while to settle to start the season after being linked with moves away. So I think there's been a multitude of factors, but I think that this has been a season that's been defined by a state of flux for Lyon. It's really, really hard to make that decision. If they can beat a team that for many is prohibitively the best in the world, and remain unbeaten with them over two fixtures, that team, playing like that, absolutely, there's no question. But the Lyon that gives in to selfishness, that struggles with its fitness, that struggles with its form, is ripe for the picking. So we don't know who's going to show up, but as we said, it'll be compelling football one way or the other, I'm sure.
That would be the thing. And I quickly want to make a point on Nabil Fekir. And the initial statement will sound a little bit strange, but do keep with me. It reminds me a little bit of, with these injuries that he gets and these little knocks, it reminds me a little bit of sort of a Wayne Rooney, where they would have a great bit of form. They'd be terrific, Nick. They'd be scoring goals and creating, and then they'd have a little niggle where they'd be out for a week or two maybe, and then it takes them 4, 5, 6 games to sort of get the motor running again. And that's, like you say, Eric, so sort of the thing I think we're seeing with Nabil Fekir, that knock for a month is still taking time to get his engines running again. And it's a frustrating one when you have such a talented player, but you just know when that when the oil's in their engine again, they'll start getting things going. But it's certainly a massive game for Lyon, and we all wish them the best to try and get through that one. We're going to finish tonight with the sort of Ligue snapshots, and I think I've left a bit of an open goal really for Jez to speak about his favourite team for his snapshot, because we were going to speak about Marseille this evening. Now, I'm pretty sure you'd quite like to take a nice shot at their 3-2 loss to Nantes.
I mean, so much of what I said about Lyon actually could also apply to Marseille, and I think the same with the fans. That both teams' fans are sort of so up and down as well. And again, as a neutral, it's not often that Nantes star in a game that you'd want to be watching as a neutral, but not Marseille the other day really was an excellent match. It sort of swung back and forth, and Nantes ended up coming out on top. But yeah, for Marseille, it was the same kind of thing. Poor defending, relying on Thauvin, hoping that he'd bail them out of it. And in the end, they weren't quite, in a match that did look a little bit more difficult. They weren't quite up to it. And again, as a neutral, it is frustrating because after last season and after all the positive sounds coming out of the club, they should have been taking a step forward. And I know I've said it so many times, but I just don't feel that they are. I think if anything, they've gone backwards because I think last year they overachieved thanks to the sort of never say die or never beaten mentality that Garcia instilled in them. But I think it's very hard to rely only on that over a longer period. Payet hasn't got a World Cup to suddenly look like he cares about his football for. So he's slipped back into a little bit of sort of suffisance. I can't think of the English word now. It's usually the other way around. And there's just
self-satisfaction.
Yeah, exactly. And there's I don't think that their squad is as talented as Lyon's, and I go from one extreme to the other with Marseille as well. In that, I think that the squad should be doing better than they are, but also when you look at them, you think some of them are actually relatively limited, and I don't think Garcia has been served very well despite all his mouthing off by Errol and Zuzaretta and the course. I don't think he's been served very well by what they've done in the transfer window, and I think he probably is fighting a bit of a losing battle. And again, the fact that they're still in touch with second place says a lot about how too many teams are not showing any kind of consistency or putting a really strong run together. Because, the Marseille fans are in the doldrums and saying they're in crisis. They're still well up there as well. And again, they shouldn't be either.
Can I throw this back at you, Jeremy? I wrote the piece I wrote this week, midweek for The Guardian. I feel like Marseille's troubles at the back. I mean, they had the second best attack in Ligue 1, I believe. I don't know, maybe someone moved ahead of them this weekend. I don't think so. I feel like this is on Garcia with his playing this 3-5-2. Look, at 3-5-2, works with attack-minded fullbacks. We think about how well that's done for Strasbourg, how well that's done for Montpellier this season with playing Oyongo and Aguilar. They were left back. They were a left back and a right back. They're attack-minded. They play more in a more advanced position. But if you have Lucas Ocampos playing as a right back, or Bouna Sarr, as a wing back, both of them are converted attacking players. I don't think they have the discipline necessary to play in that way. And I think that Garcia, persisting with that 3-4-3, whatever, 3 at the back, is really damaging his team's chances by leaving the likes of an Adil Rami, who's slow, the likes of a Boubacar Kamara, who's callow, who's inexperienced, hasn't had any experience really playing as part of a back three, or Hiroki Sakai, who's not really a center back. Leaving them exposed in those positions is what's undoing them defensively. So for as much credit as Garcia gets for last season, I think that Marseille's recent, particularly since switching that system, inconsistencies are down to the manager.
I mean, the only thing I'd say to that is, again, I think the players they've got, I don't think there's many, if any, really truly decent defenders in that club. So possibly he's kind of thinking attack is the best form of defence, and if you don't have any decent defenders and play in a formation where you only really need 3 rather than 4, I'm speculating, but I don't think it matters what formation. I just don't think the defenders that they have in their squad are Champions League worthy or even European worthy defenders. But Campos, to me, is like, I said it before about Vincent Pajot. I'm not even sure how he's a professional footballer. And as you said, Sarr, I do think is a talented player, but has never really found his best position. And a bit like Lala earlier, the fact that he's being mentioned as a possible France right back says more about the paucity of good French right backs at the moment. But to me, I would put that a little bit more. I can understand the argument about the formation not best serving them, but I would still put it more on Erwan Zubizarreta not bringing in any decent defenders.
Yeah, one that constantly rumbles on, at least anyway. Eric, what's your Liga snapshot this week?
Oh, I think that was a really nice goal from Saint-Etienne to equalize for Caen. Was a really important point for the visitors there this afternoon. And I think that he's a player who really looked impressive at times. He's on loan from Marseille. Really looked impressive for long spells at Troyes last season, but really hasn't had much of a chance playing for Caen under Mercadal, which is surprising. Mercadal prefers a 4-2-3-1. One would think that Kawi would have a natural place there as a number 10, but has really struggled to get into the team and has looked somewhat ineffective when he has. So good to see him have a good match and good to know that, or a good cameo appearance, and good to know that there's still more to come from him. He's always a player who, I know Troyes were pretty poor last season, but he was someone who could often make their matches a little bit more worth watching. So good to see him on the score sheet for the Norman side today.
Yeah, and a couple from me. One being, blimey, Emiliano Sala is showing us all wrong, isn't he? 12 goals, joint top scorer, scored a nice goal against Marseille and set up even one as well with some good hold-up play. It's those bells from the Premier League mid-table to lower table sides all ringing around their ears. I'm sure not will want to keep him under wraps and hope he doesn't score a couple more goals before the winter break, so they can maybe ghost him under those radars at least. And a highlight for Nîmes, really, we mentioned Reims. Well, I mentioned Reims last week for Mendy's excellent performance and their great run, but they've been eclipsed already, really, by the team that came up with them in Nîmes, who've won 23 points now, 6 wins, and especially after this last run, they had a great start to the season, kicked it off, but a 4-0 win over Dijon back in the start of November. It's only that loss to Nice that's the blemish on their record. You know, a victory against Strasbourg, a victory against Amiens, a victory against Caen. Many people will be saying, well, those are the games that they need to be winning, but absolutely they need to be winning them, and then they are. It's great to see them starting to score goals again. It's great to see them attacking with intent and being able to at least hold off these sides around them at least. And I think it shows that they've definitely got the ability to stay up in Ligue 1 this season. They've been on a real tear quietly in some ways because it is facing some of those smaller sides, but they'll know that when it comes to the crunch time in the back end of the season that they've already played these teams, they've beat them, and they've got the quality and the strength and depth as well in attacking areas, especially to do that again. And great to see Bozok as well get off the marker last weekend as well. Let's hope he can bang in a few more for Nîmes there. I'm sure they'll like a couple more goal scorers really within their ranks.
I was going to say, I thought that was a very nice goal as well, like a nice exchange of passes, and then he took it, for considering he hasn't had the best season so far, he took it really well.
Yeah, so, let's hope he can do it. And Ferry's a very, very nice signing for them as well. That's we probably expected Ferry to be joining a sort of mid-table Ligue side, and for Nîmes to catch him up, and with obviously Diallo out for the season and possibly, well, he's still contemplating full retirement at least. Anyway, it's a great player to get into to do them. He got that assist for the Bozok goal as well, which will give him the world of good as well. That's all that we have for this week. My thanks to Eric, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Do join us again on Thursday as we preview when we talk about those final European games. But the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.